Tonight in 9 News, buckling under the pressure. Long queues after dozens of testing sites were forced to close as infections skyrocket above 14,000. Thousands of desperate Victorians scrambled to find rapid antigen tests, with most pharmacies sold out. A jogger ambushed by thugs armed with a machete and a baseball bat. An elderly man in hospital with serious injuries after a terrifying home invasion. And MCG hero Scott Boland retains his spot for the Sydney Test.
This is Melbourne's 9 News with Dougal Beattie.
Good evening. The testing system is at breaking point tonight, with 54 PCR clinics closing their doors, unable to cope with a record 60% surge in COVID infections. More than 14,000 new cases have been reported as frontline workers feel the wrath of frustrated Victorians. Medical reporter Emily Rice has the latest.
Victoria's testing system is in turmoil, buckling under the Omicron phase of the pandemic.
Demand today is completely unprecedented.
From early this morning, traffic snarled back for kilometres around drive-through test sites, wait times exceeding 4 hours in some cases. At this Altona North clinic and across the city, those desperately seeking PCR swabs were turned away.
We're satisfied, but we don't have anything available today. You'll see it for the next couple of days.
The situation will likely worsen, with 54 testing sites run by private pathology companies shutting up shop. Melbourne Pathology, Foresight, Australian Clinical Labs and Dorovich closing for the next few days to try and catch up.
I'm afraid I'm going to ask you to continue to be patient. Our labs are working literally around the clock, having to work with a very high number of positive cases in the samples that they're processing.
Harvey Furlong tested positive to a rapid antigen test at home last Thursday. 5 days later, he's still waiting for a result.
Obviously, the testing facility is under huge pressure with the holiday surge and stuff, but I think 5's it's a long time to wait, yeah, because I had to cancel a holiday.
We've got the ludicrous situation right now that people who have been tested before the new year haven't got their results, and it's now time for them to come out of isolation.
Coronavirus is ripping through the state with a record 14,020 new cases, plus 2 deaths.
It is a system in crisis. It's absolutely chaotic.
Leading GP Mukesh Harkawal says his hard-working frontline staff are again copping abuse as public frustration grows.
It's got worse and worse. We thought it was bad last year when we first started talking about COVID.
There are now 516 patients in hospital with COVID, an increase of 122 in a fortnight.
The sheer number of cases we're seeing will put increasing pressure on our overall hospital system in the weeks to come.
The Royal Melbourne Hospital has 36 COVID patients in its care and for now is coping.
We're preparing the hospital as well as we can for, what may or may not occur, but we'll be ready if the numbers do continue to increase.
These queues outside Sunshine Hospital's vaccine facility are the sort of lines the government is glad to see.
We know around another 1 million Victorians are eligible for their third dose, and that number will increase when the 3-month change comes into effect.
At the Royal Exhibition Centre in Carlton, neonatal nurse Abby was among those rolling up their sleeves. And in addition to getting her third dose, the 24-year-old is also laying low.
It's just more being cautious about what I do, who I see, where I go.
Around 1 in 4 people getting PCR swabbed are returning a positive result. But given the difficulty of accessing a test in the first place, it's likely there are countless coronavirus cases in the community undetected.
We all need to be aware that Omicron is sweeping through our community now in a way that we have not seen in the last 2 years.
OK, let's go live to Emily at State Parliament. Emily, should Victorians brace for new restrictions?
Not sure yet, Dougal. A few days ago, the government was staunchly talking about no lockdowns, but the tone has softened somewhat today. The acting Premier says that the Health Minister will consider any common sense measures as the caseload surges. There are also calls for the Premier to return from his summer holiday. He will come back to work briefly tomorrow to join the National Cabinet, and it seems no matter who you are here in Victoria, COVID is messing up the start of our 2022.
Yes, indeed. Emily Rice, thank you. Thousands of Victorians are caught up in a rat race to find and buy their own rapid tests. Mimi Beckett tells us it's time-consuming and disheartening as supermarkets and pharmacies sell out within minutes.
Rapid antigen tests remain almost impossible to find.
They're very hard. I've tried a few places.
In a sign of the times, these people are the lucky ones at Chemist Warehouse in North Melbourne.
Yeah, almost impossible. Look at the lane.
At least 30, 40 we've been to, so this is fantastic.
At Amcal in Docklands, it's a similar story, but it doesn't take long until they're sold out.
There's no more kids, I'm sorry.
The sites were added to findarat.com.au, a website that uses crowdsourced data. Listings are added as in stock, low on stock, or overwhelmingly out of stock.
It's impossible. Even the site Find a Rat said this store had some and there's none anywhere. So I don't know what to do.
Imdad Khan has been using the site but hasn't had any luck.
I don't know how quickly they update everything, but I mean, it's a rat race.
I'm going to go try Coles. I've got a daughter that's not feeling great. We want to go to Queensland, so we're in trouble.
Almost as quickly as stockists are being listed online, they're selling out in store. In some cases, it's taking less than 10 minutes. So it's also about being in the right place at the right time. For pharmacy manager Paul Han, it's frustrating.
Every time we answer the phone call, I'm sorry, out of stock. So yeah, that'd be sad sometimes.
Online, Kogan is selling a 5-pack of saliva tests for $55, but they won't ship for 3 weeks. On Platinum Health Supply this morning, you could buy a pack of 5 for $83.95, their price rising to more than $99 later this afternoon. At Healthy Life, a subsidiary of Woolworths, they're out of stock until the 6th of January. Chemist Warehouse, Blooms and My Chemist are all sold out online too. The consumer watchdog says it's aware there's been price gouging by some retailers and it's put them all on notice.
They shouldn't be obviously engaging in cartel conduct, but also we're pointing out that we have the ability to name and shame people if they are doing the wrong thing.
Mimi Becker, 9 News.
Travellers left stranded at Melbourne Airport on Boxing Day waiting for a 90-minute PCR test are set to launch a class action against the company who promised the quick turnaround. Histopath Diagnostic Services said the results will be received before passengers boarded their flights, but many were turned away from getting tested at all, some missing the chance to travel and left out of pocket. As outrage grows over the low supply and hefty costs of rapid antigen tests, the Prime Minister has revealed a concession plan. He's hoping to push through subsidies for some at National Cabinet tomorrow, but not for everyone. Eliza Edwards explains.
The struggle to find rapid tests
There's none anywhere.
is fast becoming a political headache for the Prime Minister.
At a critical moment, we are missing a critical tool.
The nation today hitting an unwanted milestone of 500,000 COVID cases since the pandemic struck. Daily infections are now higher than they've ever been, leaving the testing system at breaking point.
The health system is under enormous stress right across the board.
Labor is accusing the government of failing to plan for the surge in demand for home testing after the first kits were approved by the TGA last September.
Home testing will be available from the 1st of November.
They have had all of that time to prepare.
Obviously, Omicron has once again changed the COVID landscape incredibly significantly.
Despite pressures brought on by the Omicron wave, the government says rapid tests won't be free for everyone. Currently, kits are only provided free for the COVID positive, close contacts and those with symptoms from some Commonwealth and state testing clinics.
Testing remains free for those who need it.
We think that if someone needs a rapid antigen test and they can't afford it, they should get one.
9 News understands the Prime Minister will take a plan to subsidise rapid tests for pensioners and low-income earners to National Cabinet tomorrow, while supply of free kits to state-run clinics will be bolstered. Leaders will also provide an update on how their hospitals are coping with higher cases.
We're really seeing limited severe disease despite those significant case numbers.
A reassuring message in testing times. Eliza Edwards, 9 News.
And experts are monitoring a new COVID variant uncovered in France, believed to have 50 mutations. It's been identified by infectious diseases experts in Marseille, where 12 people are thought to be infected. A young tradie has described the moment he thought he would die when he was threatened with a machete and baseball bat on a Sunday morning run. Police believe there are multiple victims in Melbourne's southeast. Crime reporter Lana Murphy.
Confronted by residents in Inari Warren Street, a would-be thief reaches into his pants and unveils a machete. Charging towards an innocent man in broad daylight, the young thug stops just a metre short, then runs away. The violent attack unfolding after 5 p.m. on New Year's Day. Hiding beneath a bright blue hood, the knifeman lashed out after he was spotted casing homes and cars on Farmers Way.
Male just put out a machete in the middle of the street. Shocking.
Half a day later, police believe he struck again, threatening this tradie on his Sunday jog.
If I'm lucky, get away. If not, I could possibly die going for a morning run.
The 33-year-old was running down Cranbourne's Burke Road before 7:30 a.m. on January 2nd, when a car stopped and 2 armed men ran out. One was holding a machete and a kitchen knife, the other a baseball bat.
When they confronted me and asked me for my phone and my shoes out of everything, instincts kicked in.
The victim ran for his life, sprinting more than 50 metres up the street before jumping a fence and into a stranger's yard. He was helped inside a property by a resident who then watched as the Jeep the men were travelling in sped past. The plasterer says 3 men and 1 woman were inside the speeding vehicle.
A little bit hesitant to run up that street or any back streets around here again, and just don't want it to happen to anyone else.
But officers say there are likely more victims and they're putting every resource into catching them.
They're obviously desperate, don't care of any repercussions of their actions.
Lana Murphy, 9 News.
A 72-year-old man is recovering in hospital after he was attacked in Dallas. Police say thugs broke into his house and bashed him. Maggie Rayworth reports.
Police line the street as investigators take bags of evidence from an elderly man's home.
I have a small children, 2 children, so I feel scared and I couldn't sleep after that.
At 2:30 this morning, thugs broke into a 72-year-old's Dallas home and beat him. This morning, police established a crime scene. They say at least 3 people attacked the man and fled. It's not yet known if the group stole from him. He's now being treated at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, where he's being treated for upper and lower body injuries and is in a stable condition. Those who live close to him believe he was targeted because of his large collection of birds. What happened here has terrified neighbours.
Make me really scared and upset. He's a good man. He's a really good neighbour.
Neighbours heard loud banging sounds coming from the man's house around the same time he was attacked. They say he's a kind man and are shocked by the assault.
I feel sorry for him. This is not nice, you know.
Police want witnesses to come forward. Maggie Rayworth, 9 News.
A secret settlement between Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew's Australian accuser Virginia Giuffre has been revealed. The Duke of York's legal team now believes he's shielded from prosecution by a special clause. Michael Genovese has today's developments.
New scrutiny tonight about the friendship between the Prince and the pedophile. A document sealed for more than a decade has revealed Jeffrey Epstein paid one of his accusers $700,000 to go away. Australian Virginia Giuffre signed the settlement deal in 2009, dropping her case that Epstein had abused and trafficked her to his high-profile friends. 12 years on, the contract's small print could have royal ramifications. It shows Giuffre agreed to remise, release, acquit, satisfy and forever discharge Jeffrey Epstein and anyone else considered a potential defendant. Prince Andrew believes that includes him. The Queen's second son is accused of having sex with Virginia Giuffre when she was a minor.
Didn't happen.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her.
Virginia Giuffre was 17 in this photo with the Prince taken at Ghislaine Maxwell's house in London. Maxwell was last week found guilty of trafficking young girls to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein. Virginia Giuffre reacted to that verdict from her home in Perth.
There's others who are involved that made this sex trafficking operation possible. Maxwell is just the beginning.
Virginia Giuffre's lawyer says the Epstein agreement isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. They'll try to convince a New York judge tomorrow. In the United States, Michael Genovese, 9 News.
And Europe correspondent Karianne Greenbank is at Buckingham Palace with what this means for Prince Andrew's future.
Well, ultimately that's a decision for the Queen, but these allegations have already done substantial damage to Prince Andrew's reputation and that of the British monarchy. It's important to remember that even if the civil case gets dismissed on these grounds, it in no way clears Prince Andrew of the allegations. They're not just going to simply go away, and that is something Buckingham Palace is well aware of. Prince Andrew stepped down from royal duties in 2019, but he still holds 9 military titles, and there are some calls for him to be stripped of these titles, in particular the coveted position of Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. But ultimately it will be a decision for the Queen. Prince Andrew has always denied the allegations.
A man accused of setting fire to Old Parliament House in Canberra has been granted bail. The 30-year-old, who can't be named for legal reasons, was ordered to return to Victoria and not to enter the ACT. Specialist conservators began assessing the building today, but it could take months before the true cost of the damage is clear and whether any of the heritage-listed timbers can be restored. A disappointed Glenn McGrath will be watching from afar when the pink test gets underway in Sydney tomorrow. Isolating with COVID, he's told Sophie Walsh his late wife Jane would be proud of what the event has achieved in the fight against breast cancer.
It's the only test in Sydney where a positive result will be cause for celebration. When gates open tomorrow morning, the SCG will be flushed in fuchsia. There's also a pop-up pink village where you can pull up stumps and grab a pint.
It's just a great spectacle. I love, especially day 3, turning up, seeing the whole crowd dressed in pink, getting behind the cause.
The iconic pink test is in honour of Glenn McGrath's late wife Jane, who passed away from breast cancer in 2008.
She'd probably be slightly embarrassed because the fuss that's been created, but yeah, incredibly proud and humbled by what the Foundation's achieving and the positive impact it's having on so many lives.
He'll be out of action tomorrow after testing positive to COVID-19.
Actually, I'm feeling really well. So that's, I guess, a frustrating part of it.
He's hoping to get out of isolation for day 3.
I predicted at the start of the series that Australia would win 5-0. And I think, unfortunately for England, I think that will turn out that way.
As always, Jane's closest friend, Tracy Bevan, will be cheering on from the stand.
I know my best friend would just be so proud and so grateful because that colour pink means that we'll be able to support Australian families experiencing breast cancer through our wonderful breast care nurses.
Money raised will fund more McGrath breast care nurses to give physical, psychological and emotional support to those battling the disease.
55 people every single day are diagnosed with breast cancer in Australia.
And if you can't be here at the ground, you can still get involved by purchasing a virtual pink seat online. They're hoping to sell 240,000.
And that equates to 3,400 families having the support of a breast care nurse this year.
Sophie Walsh, 9 News.
Ahead in 9 News, 3 men seriously injured after a crash split a car in 2 in Melbourne's northwest. Why Melbourne house prices are falling for the first time in more than a year. And royal praise for the Queen's mini-me.
News has no agenda. It can be frightening, devastating, uplifting. Don't just hear the news. Don't just see the news. Trust the news. This is Melbourne's 9 News.
Three men are recovering in hospital after a spectacular car crash at Kialba in Melbourne's northwest early this afternoon. The impact toppled a traffic light, breaking the vehicle in half, with one section resting on its roof nearby. One man had to be freed from the mangled wreck. A man in his 20s and another in his 30s are in a critical condition at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Melbourne house prices have fallen for the first time in more than a year. As property reporter Chris Kohler explains, a clear softening of the market is expected to continue in 2022.
House prices have been going in one direction, up. In 2021, outrageous results became normal.
Sold. We are sold!
A lot of auctions that go way over what we were expecting.
And buyers were locked out.
Too high. I mean, I'm 24. I'm not going to be able to buy a house in the next couple of years. Unless I'm in the lotto, which I'm about to go and buy a ticket.
But just 4 days into the new year, and house prices are now falling.
Certainly good news.
Excited. I don't believe you, but I'm excited.
It's true. Melbourne is now the weakest housing market in the country. Just don't call it a crash.
Certainly not crashing. This is probably more about a market that's levelling out.
Prices fell in December for the first time in 14 months. It was a tiny 0.1% slide, but a major shift is underway because for the first time in years, cheap apartments performed significantly better than expensive houses.
Probably reflective of affordability constraints starting to impact on the market, as well as more investors becoming active.
The country is now completely uneven. Melbourne, Sydney and Perth are weak. Darwin, Canberra and Hobart form the middle of the pack. And Adelaide and Brisbane are in the midst of a fresh price boom, jumping another 2.6 and 2.9% in December.
The most interesting thing is the divergence or the lack of uniformity we're seeing in the market now.
Australia's property market is now a $9.6 trillion beast, but the money is starting to dry up. The most expensive houses and cities are now some of the worst performers. And with prices now spluttering, there are plenty hoping for a collapse.
Bloody oath I would. I would love a bigger fall. I want to buy a house. I want to go and live with my family. You know, I've got a young kid to look after. I need to put a roof over his head.
Chris Kohler, 9 News.
5 of the world's most powerful nations have pledged a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. In a rare show of unity, the statement was signed by the United States, Russia, China, Britain and France, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Israel has started to administer a 4th COVID jab to medical staff and people aged over 60, while in Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said Plan B restrictions will remain, warning it would be absolute folly to think the pandemic is over. And parents are protesting against school closures in Ontario, Canada's most popular province. Indoor dining, gyms and cinemas will shut down as well. An American toddler's impressive Halloween costume has earned the praise from the Queen. Jaylene Sutherland's regal outfit was complete with a double-breasted blue jacket, and the Ohio toddler even had 2 corgis by her side. Jaylene received a letter from Windsor Castle confirming Her Majesty gave the costume a royal seal of approval. Resemblance is uncanny. It's time to check now with Madeline Slattery on the weather, and we had to brace for some heavy rain, Maddie.
That's right, we do, Dougal. Conditions will change quite dramatically. Ex-tropical cyclone Seth is still sitting off the east coast, and the prevailing conditions mean that its tropical moisture will be dragged across Victoria from tomorrow. And we're expecting 3 days of heavy rain. Central and eastern parts of the state are expected to record the highest totals. The areas in pink indicate 50 to 100 millimetres, and the areas in red more than 100. Winds are also expected to strengthen tomorrow night, especially along coastal areas, and that includes the Mornington and Bellarine peninsulas. There is the potential for some dangerous conditions with damaging winds and the likelihood of flash flooding, so the BOM is reminding us not to drive through floodwaters and to avoid camping under trees, Dougal.
Good advice. Thanks, Maddie. Well, still to come, tech entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes faces decades behind bars after she was found guilty of fraud. Plus, a hockey official reunited with an eagle-eyed fan who saved his life. And a confused driver ends up on the wrong side of the tracks. Elizabeth Holmes, a former darling of the Silicon Valley, is tonight a convicted fraudster. The American tech entrepreneur has been found guilty of lying to investors about blood testing technology, which she promised would change the world. More from Jerry DeMasi.
A Silicon Valley sensation with a promise to revolutionise healthcare.
First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
Tonight, Elizabeth Holmes is a convicted criminal, found guilty of fraud for lying to investors.
Elizabeth, what do you have to say about the charges, the conviction, the 4 counts?
Do you have any reaction to your guilty verdict here?
She had all the answers a decade ago when her company Theranos claimed just a few drops of blood could be used to run hundreds of medical tests.
We've designed it to allow for the same operations that a technologist could do in a laboratory.
Elizabeth Holmes squeezed more than $1 billion from top-end investors like Rupert Murdoch, who poured in more than $169 million. A college dropout, Holmes modelled herself after her idol, Steve Jobs. But unlike Apple, the Theranos technology just didn't work. Women were told they were pregnant when they weren't. One patient was wrongly told he had AIDS.
Do you have anything you want to say?
Are you going to appeal?
Today, aged 37 and a new mum, Holmes is facing 20 years behind bars. A marathon trial and 7 days of deliberations. A jury found her guilty on 4 of 11 counts.
The guilty verdicts in this case reflect Ms. Holmes' culpability in this large-scale investor fraud, and she must now face sentencing for her crimes.
Throughout it all, Holmes maintains her innocence. She says she's made mistakes, but failure is not a crime. In the United States, Jerry Damasi, 9 News.
Sudan's Prime Minister has resigned, leaving the military in full control after another day of mass protests rocked the capital, Khartoum. Demonstrators called for a return to civilian rule, but troops who staged a coup in October responded with force, killing 2 people. It's another blow to the African nation's fragile attempts to transition to democracy. Passengers waiting for a tram on a platform in Istanbul were stunned to see a car drive through the station. The driver apparently ended up on the tracks after missing a turn on a main road. The vehicle eventually became stuck and the motorist had to be rescued. Well, she was there to watch a game of hockey, but instead Nadia Popovic ended up saving a team member's life. The 22-year-old spotted a small mole on the man's neck and leapt into action. Reid Butler with the story.
She's a spectator turned lifesaver. Aspiring doctor Nadia Popovic was watching a hockey game in October when something else caught her eye, a small mole on the neck of a staff member from the Vancouver team.
I've never seen the mole. I didn't know it existed.
It just met all the hallmarks for, what I thought skin cancer may look like.
The 22-year-old got his attention and showed him this message on her phone. The mole on the back of your neck is possibly cancerous. It read, "Please go see a doctor." He did. And it was a type 2 malignant melanoma. Brian Hamilton was told if it hadn't been removed, he could have died within 5 years. Cancer-free and desperate to thank Nadia, he posted this call out on the team's Twitter page. It worked and the pair reunited.
I am so happy that we were able to let you know that what you did saved a life.
I really appreciate it.
I really, really appreciate that.
And back in that same seat, mid-game, a surprise the young woman will never forget.
Nadia, the Kraken and the Canucks cannot thank you enough. And together, we would like to give you $10,000 toward your college tuition. We know you're going to make a phenomenal doctor.
To top it off, Nadia's beloved Canucks thumped their rivals, but Brian is the biggest winner of all. Reid Butler, 9 News.
Chris Kohler with a day in finance next as Apple becomes the first company to reach $3 trillion. Plus, the Winter Olympics uniforms unveiled as our athletes get set for the Beijing Games. And Alan Rascal bends his elbow in the quest to find Australia's best craft beer. Saturday's Pier to Pub in Lorne has been called off due to skyrocketing infections. The Lorne Surf Lifesaving Club says it will move online instead in a bid to protect the community. The famous race will be held virtually for competitors to complete by themselves before the end of January. The annual event usually attracts up to 5,000 swimmers each year. The total value of tech giant Apple has touched $3 trillion after the pandemic turbocharged the company's meteoric rise. Chris Kohler has the details.
It only took 17 months for Apple to go from being a $2 trillion company to $3 trillion, the biggest price tag in history. That's US dollars, of course. It's more like 4.2 trillion Aussie. That means it's now bigger than all Australia's stocks combined. And even if every Australian pitched in their entire superannuation, we still couldn't afford to buy it. It also means, if it wanted to, Apple could comfortably buy a third of all houses in this country. The incredible valuation is due to the fact the share price was trading at $80 at the start of the pandemic. Now it's more than $180. Here in Australia, the share price shot to a 4-month high, up nearly 2%, with travel stocks jumping despite case numbers soaring. Miners BHP and Fortescue were among the best big stocks, and Macquarie Bank hit a new record high. And the Australian dollar rose across the board, buying 72 US cents, 63 euro cents and 53 British pence.
The craft beer industry has exploded in recent years and the search is now on to crown the country's best. But as Alan Rascal discovered, it's been a long time between drinks for Victorian brewers when it comes to a podium finish.
Raising a glass to craft beer.
I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down.
It's thirsty work. The hunt on to find the best craft beer, with votes being collected in the Great Australasian Beer Spectacular Hottest 100 competition. Canberra's Bent Spoke Brewing Company's Crankshaft IPA was the last top drop. Victoria trying to break an 11-year dry spell. The state's craft beer hasn't cracked the top 3 in over a decade, so local brewers are trying to drown that sorrow. How many times have you entered this competition?
Oh God, I reckon this is 11 years running this time. It's been a slog.
Is this your year?
This is our year.
The competition is no small beer. Last time it attracted 200,000 votes from 40,000 consumers. The craft beer industry's cup runneth over, frothing across the country. What did you enter this year?
So we've got a really broad range of beers. We actually make more beers every year than what New South Wales has COVID cases.
The winner is announced on January 22, but voting closes January 15, so there's still plenty of time to cast your ballot. Thank you. After bending the elbow, bottoms up, Alan Rascal.
Maddie is along now and some wet weather is about to arrive, Maddie.
That's right, Dougal. As well as rain and storms, it'll be rather humid and there'll be warm nights as well. Starting tonight, the city's only forecast to drop to 18. I'll have all the details on our Taste of the Tropics next. Hello again. Despite the cloudy skies, the city was still a few degrees warmer than yesterday. After an overnight low of 16, it peaked at 23. And after a mild night right across the city, eastern suburbs were slightly warmer, 26 at Scoresby, 27 at Yarra Glen, but Avalon only reached 20 and Geelong 19. And while cloud has been sitting over southern parts of the state, it's been sunny and warmer further north. The Dalesford Lavender Farm looking especially beautiful today. Ex-tropical cyclone Seth is continuing to generate abnormally high tides along the coast, and that system will cause Victoria's weather pattern to change tomorrow. This trough will drag down its tropical moisture, and parts of Victoria can expect 3 days of humid, stormy and rainy conditions. Tomorrow, scattered showers are forecast across the south and east, more widespread about the Otways and West Gippsland. The Latrobe Valley is forecast to collect up to 50 millimetres, Bairnsdale 30. Thunderstorms are expected in the afternoon and evening and could become severe, bringing up to 80 millimetres, but they will be hit and miss. The nights will also start to get warmer as humidity increases. Then tomorrow, northern districts should reach the low to mid 30s, the low to mid 20s through the south under moderate east to southeasterly winds. Showers are expected to develop in Melbourne's eastern suburbs in the early hours of the morning, and there could even be a storm. Some suburbs are in for very heavy falls, up to 70 millimetres at Pakenham. Along the Mornington Peninsula, Rosebud and Frankston could get up to 45. Not quite as heavy through the west, 20 millimetres for Geelong. Storms are most likely in the afternoon and evening, and they could deliver isolated higher totals. And a road weather alert has been issued for the Melbourne area, with roads likely to become quite slippery. It'll be a warm night with minimums in the mid to high teens, then most spots will warm up to 26 or 27. Similar conditions on Thursday and Friday. More warm nights with minimums of 19 and 21, maximums of 28 and 27. Then the humidity will start to flush out on Friday night. Only a light shower or two on Saturday and a top of 21. Settled conditions after that. 24 degrees on Sunday and Monday, 22 on Tuesday. But the Ducks should like the weather tomorrow. After a low of 18, the city is heading for 26 with up to 30 millimetres of rain, but it will be hit and miss, Dougal.
Yes, typical Melbourne. Thanks, Maddie. And that is 9 News for this Tuesday. Layla is up next with the current affair. Enjoy your evening. Good night.